Commanding a U.S. aircraft carrier may be the most powerful job afloat. One officer running a floating city of 5,000 people and 90 aircraft. Yet these 5 captains all became famous for the very same reason, a single moment that ended up on camera for the whole world to see. Some of these are scandals that ended decorated careers in a single day. One is a sitting president doing something no commander-in-chief had ever done before. And one is a farewell so powerful it brought a crew of thousands to their feet. From a viral internet sensation to a collision in the dark to a goodbye no one who saw it will ever forget. These are 5 of the wildest aircraft carrier captain moments ever caught on film. We're counting them down from 5 to 1, and the scene at number 1 is, without question, one of the most unforgettable moments ever recorded on a warship's deck. Stay with me to the end. Number 5, a president falls out of the sky. We start with a moment so audacious the Navy had never allowed it before. May 1st, 2003. The carrier USS Abraham Lincoln is steaming about 30 miles off San Diego, coming home from a record 10-month deployment, when a small jet, an S-3B Viking, drops out of the sky, catches an arresting cable, and slams to a violent stop on the flight deck. Over the loudspeaker comes the call, from the stern, Navy 1, and out of the co-pilot seat, in a green flight suit, climbs the President of the United States. George W. Bush had just become the first sitting president in history to make a tailhook landing on an aircraft carrier. The same jolting, 2G arrested stop every Navy aviator endures. A Navy pilot was at the controls, but Bush, who had flown jets in the Air National Guard decades earlier, rode up front and even took the stick for part of the flight out. For the Lincoln's captain, it was a day unlike any other in the ship's life, hosting the commander-in-chief on his flight deck, live in front of the entire nation. Bush then spoke beneath a banner reading "Mission Accomplished," an image that would go on to become one of the most debated of the whole Iraq War. The White House later said the banner simply marked the ship's long deployment finally ending. But as the war stretched on for years, the phrase took on a life of its own. But our next captain made worldwide headlines for the exact opposite reason. Number 4, the buck stops here. February 2025. The USS Harry S. Truman, a 100,000-ton supercarrier, is operating at night in the crowded shipping lanes near the Suez Canal when it collides with a merchant vessel, the Besiktas M. The damage is caught in stark daylight photos. Long gashes torn down the carrier's back end, and a slash punched clean through the hull above the waterline. No one is hurt, and the ship stays in the fight. But in the Navy, a collision like that comes with a price, and it lands on one man. Just over a week later, the Truman's commanding officer, Captain Dave Snowden, is relieved of command, fired, for what the Navy called a loss of confidence in his ability to command. As one senior Navy official put it, the buck stops with him. It is the oldest and hardest rule of the sea. Whatever happens to that ship, it belongs to the captain. One bad night and a career built over nearly 30 years is over, and the Truman's troubles didn't end there. Across that same hard deployment, the ship also lost 3 F/A-18 Super Hornet fighters in separate mishaps. But here's the twist. The captain the Navy brought in to steady the Truman was a skipper who had become a household name for doing the exact opposite with a camera, turning it into a weapon. Number 3, muffins versus missiles. In 2024, the carrier USS Dwight D. Eisenhower is in the Red Sea, leading the fight against Houthi attacks on shipping, the most intense sustained combat the U.S. Navy has faced since World War II. And again, the Houthis claim online that they've hit, even sunk, the Eisenhower. They hadn't. So the ship's captain, Christopher Jauda Hill, a former Top Gun instructor, fights back in the most unexpected way imaginable, with memes. Every time a fresh "we sank the Ike" rumor catches fire, Hill posts cheerful pictures from the very much afloat carrier. Sailors eating cookies in his chair, Taco Tuesday spreads, warm cinnamon rolls and muffins fresh from the ship's bakery. Even a recurring four-legged sidekick, the ship's unofficial dog. After one round of false claims, He dryly joked online that they'd only been sunk a couple of times all year. A supercarrier captain calmly trolling an enemy's disinformation campaign while running live combat operations made him arguably the most famous carrier skipper of his generation. He always insisted the post had a serious purpose, connecting 5,000 sailors to their anxious families back home, while quietly puncturing an enemy propaganda machine so fixated on the ship that even the top Houthi leader name dropped the Eisenhower in his speeches. It was a brand new kind of warfare, fought with a phone. Our next captain's moment on camera didn't make him famous, though. It ended everything. Number 2, the videos that sank a career. Captain Owen Honors was the commanding officer of the legendary carrier USS Enterprise. But years before, when he was the ship's second-in-command, he had produced and starred in a long series of videos played for the crew on movie night. Clips full of crude, raunchy humor, vulgar language, and offensive slurs. They were meant, he said, to boost morale on back-to-back deployments, and much of the crew loved them. Then, in early 2011, a newspaper obtained the videos and posted them online, and the Navy moved within days. Honors was permanently relieved of command of the Enterprise for what a senior admiral called a profound lack of good judgment. A Navy investigation eventually counted at least 25 of the videos shown over time to the roughly 6,000 sailors aboard, and dozens of personnel connected to them were disciplined or counseled. Honors argued that his superiors had known about the videos for years and even praised them, but it no longer mattered. The footage was public, and his command of one of the most storied ships in the fleet was finished. A board of inquiry would later let him stay in the Navy, but he never commanded a ship again. It's the perfect lesson in how a moment caught on camera can wait years, then come back to end a career overnight. But our number 1 isn't a scandal or a stunt or a clever post. It's the moment that years later can still put a lump in a sailor's throat. Number 1, Captain Crozier. Captain Crozier. In the spring of 2020, as COVID-19 swept the planet, an outbreak ripped through the crew of the carrier USS Theodore Roosevelt. Her captain, Brett Crozier, wrote an urgent letter begging the Navy for help getting his nearly 5,000 sailors off the ship and isolated, warning plainly that sailors do not need to die. The letter leaked to the press. The outbreak had already driven the ship into port in Guam, with hundreds of infected sailors moved ashore, and within days the Navy relieved him of command. An online petition demanding his reinstatement gathered tens of thousands of signatures almost overnight. But what happened next, no one planned. As Crozier walked alone down the gangway to leave his ship for the last time, hundreds upon hundreds of his sailors flooded the hangar bay and erupted, clapping, cheering, and chanting his name again and again. "Captain Crozier! Captain Crozier!" He stopped at the bottom, turned, and gave them one last wave. The videos tore across the internet within hours, and millions watched an entire crew roar a thunderous, defiant goodbye to the captain they believed had gambled his own career to protect their lives. The fallout was enormous. The acting secretary of the Navy flew all the way out to the ship and, over the loudspeaker, told the crew their captain had been too naive or too stupid to command, remarks that promptly leaked and triggered such an uproar that he resigned just days later. But the image that endured is the one the cameras caught. One man walking away to thousands of voices chanting his name. 5 captains. 5 moments none of them could ever take back. A president dropping out of the sky. A career-ending collision in the dark. An internet folk hero armed with muffins. A scandal years in the making. And the most stirring farewell the modern Navy has ever seen. Together, they're a reminder that the man or woman in command of a carrier carries a weight almost no one else will ever know. And that out there, every single decision plays out in front of an audience. Because on an aircraft carrier, the captain is always being watched. And sooner or later, the camera catches everything.